Good afternoon, Madam Secretary, please take roll.
Assemblywoman Anderson. Assemblywoman Benitez Thompson. Assemblywoman Bilber Axelrod. Assemblywoman Considine. Assemblyman Hafen. Assemblywoman Kasama. Assemblyman Miller. Assemblyman O'Neill. Assemblyman Ortlicker. Assemblyman Roberts. Assemblyman Yeager. Chair Cohen.
And I am here. Please mark the Vice Chair present when she arrives. Good afternoon, everyone. To Assembly Revenue, we have two things on the agenda today, a work session on Assembly Bill 363 and public comment. Please keep in mind for public comment, the length of time for public comment will be 30 minutes, and each person will be limited to 2 minutes, and we will be timing that. I'm going to skip the normal introductions and housekeeping and just go right into the work session. Welcome, Assemblywoman Nguyen. And just for committee members and anyone watching, we'll be working from proposed amendment 3378 to Assembly Bill 363. So with that, I think before we have Mr. Nakamoto go through the work session document, I want to see if we've got questions or comments from anyone in the committee. So committee, normally we don't have a ton of questions, but feel free because this has been a work in progress. And I know Assemblywoman Nguyen has continued to work with it and is still getting requests and recommendations probably right now on her phone, but throughout the day and throughout the week. So feel free to ask any questions that you have. So with that, or we can, actually maybe Assemblywoman Nguyen, if we can have you go through it first and then we'll go to questions.
Thank you, Chair Cohen and members of the Revenue Committee. My name is Rochelle Nguyen. I represent Assembly District 10. I will kind of go through some of the overview highlights of what is included in this mock-up. I did ask legal to, and I'm very grateful for the division to put it in this mock-up form because I think that it makes it easier to read and conceptualize. On the flip side, Chair, you are very correct. I am receiving proposed changes and clarification, everything from complete policy changes to clarifying language to kind of encapsulate what the intent is. And as you can see on here on the mock amendment, and for those watching in the public too, this does show them still in the conceptual form, and the language and its placement in the official amendment may differ. So if there are like spelling errors or duplicative language or things didn't get into one section into the other, I'm sure that I know legal will be working to clean that up as well. So if we just kind of start from, I guess, the beginning, the major change that this bill is broken up into two sections, one that kind of deals with cities or municipalities and one that deals with counties. And so there's conforming language in each one of those sections to go there. To start off with, we did and still include the population cap of 700,000 to accommodate those jurisdictions that already have no regulations in place and would continue. Just to let the members of the committee know, in talking with those jurisdictions, it would have been very difficult and it would have led to potential lawsuits for those I guess homeowners and people operating short-term rentals to now be under some of the provisions that we have in here. So, but I do plan on continuing to work no matter what happens with this bill, like into the next session, to see what we can do to accomplish some of the problems that might exist throughout the state. Additionally, one of the things that's included in here is language allowing jurisdictions that have already established ordinances in this area to keep their ordinances. As I had stated during my presentation, which is still my intent, I wanted to still allow flexibility for those municipalities that have already included, and I've already like worked with their local constituents to come up with ordinances in this area. So they will still be allowed to. The restrictions that we had placed in the original bill and those that had been proposed during the presentation of the bill have changed as well. For example, the 1,000 feet separation distance requirement is now 660. I know conceptually it had proposed it at 500. And speaking with some of the stakeholders, that was one of the things that was very important to be able to look at. And again, these numbers for occupancy requirements, for distance separation requirements, they are all like a floor or ceiling, like not to exceed or not to. So if for example, in this, it says that you can't have more than 16 individuals in a short-term rental, and you can't have them closer than 660 feet between short-term rentals. If a city wanted to go more strict than that, like for example, if the city of Las Vegas wanted to have only owner occupied like they do, they would be able to keep that in place. If, for example, the city of Henderson has 1,000-foot difference, they would be able to keep that in place. So they just couldn't go below the 660 level. If they wanted to limit their houses to 4 people in a house, they would be able to do that under the provisions of this bill if that's what their local government chose to enact as a part of their local ordinances. Additionally, I heard the concerns, and it was a concern of mine in even bringing the bill with regards to the loss of affordable housing. We've seen it happen in other areas, and so I wanted to make sure that that was kind of covered. And so in particular, there were areas, and you can see I've excluded all apartments from being able to have STRs. So an apartment complex would not be able to have an STR. In addition to other multifamily dwellings, we had some clarifying language to kind of carve out those, properties that are, for lack of a better term, like they're attached to a casino, they're run like a casino, they're cleaned like a casino property. And so they are not included in this at all. And so they can continue to operate in that way. And they have been. So a lot of them are either timeshares or other types of rentals that are run kind of like resort casinos anyway. So they are carved out of this, the provisions of this, because a lot of them are like on the same property as the casino. And so that was not my intent, was to not include those types of properties. It was to include the properties that were outside of that. I know that there's a lot of confusion about the grandfathering in and what that meant. Just to clarify, and we're still potentially working on that language to make sure that there isn't any kind of loophole that people have been operating. To make it very clear, if you have been operating illegally, like I know thousands of people have, unfortunately, in Clark County, fortunately and unfortunately, depending, I guess, on the circumstance, that is not who is grandfathered in. The people that would be grandfathered in are people that are operating lawfully under current ordinances for these local jurisdictions. An example I would give is if we have a local casino, let's say you're at Green Valley Ranch and the city of Henderson has allowed a short-term rental across the street that is within the 2,500 feet limitation that we have in this. Under this bill, that person would be grandfathered in as long as they were in compliance with what was existing in the city of Henderson as far as their ordinances and regulations. So it is not grandfathering in illegal properties or people that are operating unlawfully. Additionally, during this time, there are some other clarifying amendments that we are making sure, and I will tell you, like I said, this is a mock-up, but it is our intent to make sure that, just as I've always said, and sometimes it's wordsmithing some of these languages, the language of some of these bills. So for example, if you're looking in section 11, section 2, it's on page 8 if you have it printed out. There's a paragraph that starts for the purposes of paragraph B, subsection 1, the accommodations facilitator shall be deemed to engage in the business of this is causing a lot of confusion. So I'm looking at how we would either word it or remove it because I don't think it encapsulates the intent that I've been talking to you all about. I will continue to work with legal to make sure that that is the intent, is that there is that clarity. Additionally, I have received amendments from the city of Henderson to just kind of give, and the city of Las Vegas and Clark County, to make sure that there's still that flexibility. You'll see some of the language changed because depending on where you are, people call it a permit or a registration or an authorization. So you'll see a lot of things we've used the term authorization. But we want to make sure that we're giving the flexibility to those local jurisdictions. So for example, sometimes it's the incorporated city, the city council, or their designee. So there will be other amended language changes to make sure that we're fully capturing that intent to give the flexibility to those local jurisdictions to continue. I know that we are also working on some wordsmithing about, for example, in section 7, subsection 2K, it appears that only a neighbor can complain about a violation of an ordinance adopted, and we want to make sure that that could be anyone that's complaining. You don't have to have an immediate neighbor that's the only person that's able to lodge any kind of complaints about STRs that are operating unlawfully or in violation of any ordinance. And we are looking to make sure that Clark County, the city of Las Vegas, the city of Henderson, and other municipalities and counties have the expressed authority to impose civil fines and penalties. That's something that I had talked with Assemblyman Roberts and I have been both working to figure out how we can make sure that that enforcement piece is also, effective. I know that even Clark County Commissioner Justin Jones had recently met with Captain Farisi and members of, I believe, Section 10 and 11 recently to kind of discuss what kind of support they needed in order to effectively impose fines. And so there will be language that it was included in there, and we're just trying to wordsmith it to make sure that it's actually something that can be implemented. So I will continue to do that. I think that kind of answers some of the major questions. I don't know if the committee has any specific questions that they can direct me to, and I can look on the mock-up.
Thank you, Assemblywoman. I want to make sure we've got the limitation on nights discussed. So I believe that's in 7 sub 2D. And so what we're saying is if you're owner occupied, it's 1 night. And if it's not owner occupied, the guest can stay 2 nights or more.
That's Rochelle Wynn for the record. That is correct. We've been going kind of back and forth through the wording because it's kind of awkward and choppy. But yeah, the intent and what we're trying to get in there. And so hopefully it'll read a little bit better when the final amendment is drafted. The intent is if it's owner occupied, you can rent for 1 night. But if it's any other property, it would be 2 nights. In addition to that owner-occupied piece, I know that we are trying to put some clarifying language. There were some concerns that someone would have a 4-bedroom house, and they would be living in one of the bedrooms and then renting out all 3 of them, kind of as a hostel. And that's not our intent to allow for something like that. So we're just coming up with some clarifying language. I'm not sure what that's going to look like right now. I've had a couple of different things, and I know legal is kind of looking at what works legally, but that's also our intent, is that you're not able to operate a mini hotel within your house, even if you're living in there. So that's also some clarifying language that hopefully will make its way into what the final amendment looks like.
Okay, thank you. And then the 660 feet, I don't think you said it. I've heard you say it before, but I don't think you said it. You said it at this hearing. That's because that's what a city block is?
That is, Rochelle Wynn for the record, that is what I was told. I know that is what they have at the city of Las Vegas. It is 660 feet. I've been told by code enforcement and code and planning people that that is a city block, approximately.
Okay, thank you. We've got some other questions. We'll start with Assemblywoman Bilberry Axelrod.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'll start with that 660 thing. Excuse me. So 660, you said it was a block. I'm kind of confused, and I've been confused on this, and now that it's up, that's, from what I understand, like as the crow flies, correct? So, and if that is the case, then that kind of confuses me with the city block thing, because I'm thinking if I'm on a street here, and then my neighbor's behind me, and then the neighbor behind that, that would be 660 feet probably, although if you were going on streets, it wouldn't be. So just if you could clarify that.
It's from your property line, so it's a 660 feet from like a 360.
Yeah, so like,
So it's a
okay.
360.
As old people say, as the crow flies?
Yes, as the crow
Yes.
flies. So that exactly. Sorry, Rochelle Wynn for the record. It would be 660 feet apart. And again, that is a minimal distance. If people choose to increase that, they would be able to do so.
Okay, and one more, if I may. And first of all, I wanted to say thank you so much for all the work you've done on this, because I know all of us have been blown up on this. I think there's a lot of confusion, and I know for my folks in Clark County who can't even legally do this, this is very necessary, so I wanted to get that on the record. The last thing I just wanted you to clarify, you talked about section 11 on page 8, sub B, and you said that how it's written right now is not the intent, and you're going to be working on that, but could you just lay out, I'm really confused by that section.
You know what? Sorry, Rochelle Wynn for the record. It's actually section 11, part 2.
That's what I meant. That's where I have my
Okay.
arrow to.
Hold on
Sorry.
1 second. I have my other notes here. Sorry. I want to make sure I get both of them in here. I almost said court's indulgence, but chair's indulgence for 1 moment.
I'll just say for the record, so section 11, sub 2, paragraph B. That's what we're discussing.
If you could pause for 1 moment, I think I know who I can call a friend in here. I think I see Mr. Harrison over there. He might be able to kind of help clarify some of that language. So if you could give me 1 second. See, I'm going to give him a point. I'm going to give Clark County a point here. Rochelle Wynn for the record. That section causes some problems. I know that in speaking with Clark County, as well as culinary, as well as even members of this committee, they want to, the way that this is read is they want to be able to place additional requirements on the accommodations facilitators within their local ordinances. So we want to make sure that we're granting them some express authority to like impose fines or penalties for failure to comply with those additional requirements set forth by the board. So this is just kind of some enabling, like if we have that in there, it like ties their hands where they're not able to do anything like that. So we want to make sure that they can enact things where they can, appropriately, levy fines.
Thank you.
Assemblywoman Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Assemblywoman Nguyen, for all the work, because, you got a lot. Mike, I've got 2 questions. Again, is from that same section, because just I'm wondering if there is, or possibly in another area, is there any place where there's a licensing expectation being placed on not on the platforms that are actually doing that area? I don't know if that's in that section or another section, because we had talked about possibly the national area or the groups that are doing this online. Is there any sort of requirements for them to also do a licensing? I know we had talked about it, but I just couldn't find it.
I'm looking for this section. Rochelle Wynn for the record. There is provisions, and I've just got to figure out what section it is. And I had also, it's clarified as well, and it should be actually in the most recent conceptual amendment that was distributed to everyone. The platforms would have to put the license, not only would the owner have to like display the license in the house, it would also have to be displayed on the platform. I can tell you how it works, like in the city of Henderson. They have like a process where they have a portal where they can go through and they can see everyone who is listed on, like, for example, one of the short-term rental platforms, and they can compare it to all the people that they know are licensed. And then they can say, hey, look, these are all the people that are not included on your platform, please take them off. So that language is included in there, and I know that is done in practice in our state.
Great, and thank you for that clarification. But do the platforms themselves ever have to also file with the state that they are in fact doing this? As like, do they have to do a business license of any sort?
Rochelle Wynn, for the record, I am not sure. I don't know if legal knows that answer or if they can get back to you with those kind of questions, but I would be happy to continue having that conversation.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Chair.
Assemblyman Miller?
I should know that by now. Thank you, Chair. And actually, one of my questions was addressed in in your clarification of the night stays and everything. So thank you for that. Thank you, Assemblywoman Nguyen, for what you've done. You've taken a lot of my thoughts into consideration. One of the things that I just want to get on the record that I'm kind of concerned about with how we handle the owner-occupied situations is that I think that we have to really just keep into consideration those people, especially as we look at affordability of housing right now, and people who may have an extra room that they want to rent. And if we have one that's in the 660 parameter that is being operated essentially as a business, and then we have the family next door, a couple houses down, that need to rent out their room, to kind of keep the mortgage going, they are now prohibited or would be prohibited from doing so. And so as we continue to move forward, and I know you're still working things out, I would just really like to, make sure that we are trying to figure out a solution that allows people who genuinely need this avenue to keep the roof over their head an opportunity to do so. But I think it's important and we need to move it forward as we're losing too much money as a state and people are legitimately using this service. So that's all. I just wanted to get that on the record since my question was answered about the one night stay. Thank you.
Would you like to respond to that?
Thank you, Rochelle Wynn, for the record. Thank you, Assemblyman Miller. We've been going back and forth on the owner-occupied in particular. Right now, it is not included in there to allow just owner-occupied to exist, but will continue to have those kind of conversations with you going forward.
Okay, Assemblywoman Considine.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I echo everybody's sentiments, Assemblywoman Nguyen, about all the hard work that you've taken on for this bill, and I appreciate the conversations. I just kind of have, I guess, more of a follow-up question. Page 6, so it would be Section 8, Sub 3. So it's upon the request of a Board of County Commissioners, of course, there's a matching one for the city later on, an accommodations facilitator shall report all current listings of a residential unit. So there's the use of the word shall in there, But my question is, well, what if they don't? If there's a time frame, if the county commission or the city says, okay, can you please give this to me within 30 days, and they don't? Or the county or the city requests, hey, these folks are not permitted or authorized, can you take them off the platform? And they don't. Is there a penalty structure? Is that left up to the ordinance? Is there an issue with kind of penalizing the platform for not doing their part?
Rochelle Wynn, for the record, it's my intention that it has been, as complicated as this is, platform liability is even more complicated. As members of this committee and everyone knows, there are so many platform-based peer-to-peer sharing apps and other things out there, and it is definitely something that we need to probably have been addressing as a legislative body probably about 15 years ago. But it's not specifically laid out in this bill. It is not something that I'm able to include in this bill and fully address any of the concerns. I do want to have the ability for those local ordinances to take place to deal with it on that level. So I'm currently looking at how we can include that enabling language without like interrupting interstate commerce and other like issues that might pop up if we don't get that language right.
Thank you. Can I do a quick follow-up, Chair?
As quick, please.
Okay, well, thank you very much. And I just want to make sure that I'm reading this in an overall way, that this is a floor. That if any jurisdiction wants to do something a little bit more stringent, they cannot go below this, but they could do something a little bit higher if they chose to. Thank you.
Rochelle Wynn, for the record. I know that this is what a lot of emails have come in. There's a lot of misinformation out there. And we are all, it's a representative government. So I know that you are all hearing from your own constituents about this. That is definitely the intent. That is what the language specifically says. Having gone through, I think there are 4 legal representatives that have been working on this for LCB to make sure that this language is correct. These are floors. They are not to exceed or maximums for all of these jurisdictions. I have been working diligently with, especially within Clark County, with those that have ordinances to make sure that they are able to keep those ordinances and they don't have to go back and change that. I know the city of Henderson has a bit of a difference as they allow for 25% occupancy in a multifamily, and this brings it back down to 10. So those are some continued conversations I will be having with them, as well as working on the bill to see how we can make sure that those kind of needs are met in that area. This still gives those jurisdictions flexibility to move, but it does leave a floor so we can protect our housing availability in our communities that maybe don't have the protections of a homeowners association and don't want to have to create a homeowners association to have those kind of protections. But like I said, on the flip side, there are plenty of people, and I'm sure you've heard emails from your constituents and kind of echo some of the sentiment of like Assemblyman Miller, who would like to have the ability to continue to, rent out a room if they need to. And so balancing some of those interests, those are some of the things that we took in. But definitely floor and ceiling, depending on what it is, for these local jurisdictions to come up with ordinances that fall within those.
Assemblyman Ortlicker.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Assemblywoman Wynn, for all you've done with this. David Ortlicker, Assembly District 20, for the record. One question I have is, other states probably have had more experience with these kinds of laws, and are we following a well-trodden path? Is there a kind of convergence on a certain template or is everybody all over the map? How do we compare to other states and this kind of thing?
Rochelle Wynn, for the record. I would say just looking at our state and the way different counties and different cities have done it kind of is illustrative of what it looks like across the country. People are all over the place on ordinances, liability, implementation, how they do it. So I think people are trying to figure it out. I don't believe it's ever been addressed on a state level. And you can see that people are trying to do it. A lot of these issues where they change things midway were problematic, where people were existing lawfully and then ordinances were changed to do it. So we are all over the place, and there are lots of considerations, everything from, I guess, commerce and, being able to use and be able to invest in these properties, as well as housing affordability issues. So it really is all over the place.
Okay, Assemblywoman Kasama.
Thank you, Chair. Assemblywoman Nguyen, thank you again. What a big project you've taken on, and I think something that we know from our constituents, there's been kind of an outcry for assistance with this. And I just wanted to thank you so much for looking at some of the concerns or issues I've had, and your willingness to look at some of those to incorporate. And I just wanted to thank you for just your openness with all of these suggestions. Thank you.
Rochelle Wynn for the record. Thank you,
Your
Assembly.
attention, please. The Assembly is about to convene.
Oops. Yeah, I will continue to work. I can see sometimes the wording isn't quite there or doesn't capture the intent,
Your attention,
but that
please.
is what
The Assembly
I will continue
is
to do.
about to
Okay, and with that, I was hoping we could get the vote in before we had to go to floor. Okay, so with that, we're going to adjourn. We will take the vote when we come back because. Recess, I'm sorry, recess. We will be back on the floor because we do have to go to the floor. Unfortunately, we have 120 days and this is what happens. So we're going to recess. We will come back, take a motion, and then do our public comment. So with that, we are in recess. Revenue members who are watching, please make your way to 4100 immediately. BPS, are you ready?
Chair, broadcast is ready, and you may call the meeting to order when you're ready.
Thank you. We're going to come out of recess and come back to order. So I believe before we take the motion, Assemblywoman Nguyen has a clarifying statement.
Rochelle Wynn for the record. I noticed this, and like I said, I know that that was a conceptual mock-up and that legal will work to draft it. And as there's two sections for municipalities and counties, I noticed that we needed to make some changes. My intention was to not include apartments both in city and county. So we wanted to make sure that section 13.2 was consistent with section 7.2 G1. And so I'll make sure that those changes are made.
Thank you. And with that, I will take a motion to amend and do pass. Okay, I have a motion by Assemblyman Roberts. I have a second by Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. Do we have any discussion? Go ahead, Assemblywoman Considine.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just wanted to say that I will be voting this out of committee today, but I reserve my rights pending the amendment.
And as a reminder, you always have the right to do so. Please just check in with me should you change your vote by the time we get to floor. Okay, so the motion's been made and seconded. So all those in favor, aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Okay, so no nays, so that was unanimous of all members present. I will assign the floor statement to Assemblywoman Nguyen with a backup from Assemblywoman Bilbray Axelrod. So thank you, Assemblywoman. And with that, we will move on to public comment. As a reminder, public comment is going to be for 2 minutes per caller at the most, and we will have up to 30 minutes of public comment. Is there anyone in the room for public comment? Please go ahead as soon as you're ready.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Chris Daly, Nevada State Education Association, the voice of Nevada educators for over 120 years. As you know, there's less than 2 weeks left in this legislative session. We're still waiting on a public discussion of mining taxes and serious contemplation of generating revenue needed by public education and other important public services in Nevada. It's past time to open a public hearing on AJR 1. K-12 public education has been woefully underfunded for decades, ranking 48th among the states in per pupil funding. Nevada also has the largest student-to-teacher ratio in the country. Still being considered, and we'll see what happens in this room in a little bit, is a $156 million cut to class size reduction over the next biennium. This would mean a loss of about 1,000 teachers across the state, meaning even more students packed into Nevada classrooms. Also still in play is a $33 million cut to early literacy supports in the Read by Grade 3 program. Last session, SB 543, the new school funding plan, created the Commission on School Funding and charged it with recommending funding targets and identifying revenue to fully fund the associated cost. Last month, the Commission published their preliminary recommendations for optimal funding. While NSEA opposed SB 543, we largely agree with the Commission's funding targets. The Commission proposed reaching adequate funding by increasing education investment by $2 billion over the next 10 years. That's about $400 million each biennium, starting with this session. That's why NSEA believes AGR 1 passed in the 32nd special session would be a strong start to meeting this goal. AGR 1 would generate about $485 million in new revenue for Nevada annually. It's the right-sized response this session to the revenue challenge that we all face. We've all heard there's been conversations about a possible deal with the mining industry, but no one seems to know any of the parameters. It's time to open up the conversation. Please schedule AJR 1 here for this conversation. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your public comment. Anyone else in the room for public comment? Seeing none, we will go to the phones. BPS, first person for public comment, please.
If you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. With the caller with the last 3 digits, 501, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and we begin now.
My name is Johnny Desmond, last name Desman. So for STR operators, this bill, AB 363, is extremely concerning, and I oppose it as written. First, I would like to point out that Assemblywoman Wynn has voiced that she does not believe bans work. Well, what about all the STR owners that will be banned from operating due to not being one of the lucky ones following with these extensive distance restrictions? There's no difference. Thousands of owners will still be flat out banned from operating. If you're going to set these extreme provisions, I believe we should look to lower the 31-night minimum for operators that don't have the fair opportunity to get a permit. Why not something closer to a weekly minimum for non-licensed operators? I can almost guarantee you that any guest coming for longer than a weekend is not coming to just party, which so many people seem to be so concerned about. In my experience, most of these guests are coming to Vegas for business, and this will eliminate thousands of lodging options for these travelers. Allowing non-licensed operators to run weekly stays will give everyone at least some opportunity to make an extra income and continue to hire local people such as cleaners, contractors, lawn service, pool service, etc. Look, we're about to enter the post-pandemic life, and the way travelers prefer to lodge will never be the same. If you take away all of these STR options from travelers, there's a good chance many of them might look elsewhere when they plan their next vacation. I mean, this is Vegas. We're supposed to be one of the most innovative cities in the world. These restrictions make us look like we're years behind the times. And we've heard all the lazy excuses as to why people think STRs are bad. They're just party houses. No, they're not. You can set your own rules and guests tend to follow rules. It's kind of crazy, huh? And STRs are bad for businesses. No, I challenge everyone to name a number of hotels, casinos, or gaming centers that have been forced to shut their doors due to STRs. And the answer is none. But if this bill passes, thousands of independent owners will be forced to shut theirs. With the way the provisions are written in this bill, this could be the final blow to not only the majority of STR operator businesses, but to our livelihoods
Sir, you're
as well.
at 2 minutes. If you could wrap up, please.
Yep. I really hope you reconsider looking over so many lovely residents that are just looking for a way to help provide for themselves and their families. Thank you.
Thank you. Next person for public comment, please, on the phones.
Yes, Chair. Will the caller with the last 3 digits, 447, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Thank you. My name is David Figler, D-A-Y-V-I-D, F like in Frank, I-G-L-E-R, and I'm the president of the John S. Park Historic Neighborhood in downtown Las Vegas. We know a lot about STRs as they are legal and abundant in ours and surrounding neighborhoods. Even though legal, STRs encourage investors over vested neighbors, reduce housing stock for first-time buyers and renters looking for a house over an apartment, increase haphazard traffic from people unfamiliar with the area, and pierce the quiet enjoyment of a neighborhood with events, parties, and frankly, people coming to our community to do a too much Vegas without consequence. They also encourage stripping of historic interiors and flipping to lure the transient visitor to the exclusion of our heritage in Las Vegas's oldest communities. That STRs are able to proliferate greater under this bill without taking into account all these consequences is not lost on us, the homeowners and residents most impacted by any scheme like AB 363. If it passes, it invariably means more STRs, even with important city flexibility. I really appreciate Assemblywoman Nguyen accepting our calls to her and listening to our many concerns when we recently became aware of this bill, including the need to protect the flexibility that our city land use ordinances allow in regulating and taxing this industry, as they have done after a 5-year collaborative effort with mine and other neighborhood associations, which are not HOAs, that are registered with the city and which represent thousands of homeowners and long-term renters. But even today, we are in the blind giving testimony, and that's where we've been for most of this bill creation process. Despite our vast knowledge, our track record of participation on this topic, and the fact that we are the ones most impacted by anything anyone does on short term, we are in the blind. Because while some answers are being provided today, it is obviously still a work in progress, and we still haven't been invited to participate in the shaping, or maybe more importantly, the consequences of any tinkering that could allow one single more STR in our specific and unique communities. And if any additional STRs are allowed anywhere, an additional burden on our enforcement entities will result. And without funding or any consequence for the platforms not complying with these new rules, we will be the ones who bear the impact because there will be less enforcement than we
Sir,
rely
we're at
upon
2
now.
minutes. If you could
So
wrap it up, please.
Certainly. It is focused only on Clark County, which is not fair since it was supposed to be statewide initially. We have a diverse set of different concerns within our county. But finally, I want to address one thing that hasn't been addressed, and why does the gaming industry get a 2,500-foot buffer baked into its wall?
BPS, next person, please.
One moment, Chair. Will the caller with the last 3 digits, 963, please slowly state and spell your name for the record? You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
This is Tara Anderson, TERA-ANDERSON. I am the Rancho Manor president in Southern Nevada. Thank you very much for your efforts on this bill. While I appreciate that the birth of this bill was a result of an effort to help address short-term rentals, this bill in and of itself is an egregious overreach, and I think requires and calls for a substantive reconsideration of the contents of the bill. There's 2 major issues that I think are of noteworthy consideration, one of which is, while I appreciate Assemblywoman Nguyen's comments in keeping the local jurisdictions oversight, the unintended consequences that come with this bill is a grave overreach by the state, in that this is a nuanced issue that affects local communities, local neighborhoods very uniquely. And I think more importantly, it calls for the management, unfettered oversight and authority to be preserved by local communities, i.e. City of Las Vegas, Henderson, North Las Vegas, and the county, to govern according to what the in real time needs are of their neighborhoods. The bill language currently includes a lot of, quote, certain exclusions from the governing language and the authority of the local municipalities to manage this issue. And I think its unintended consequences are worth considering. Subsequently, this bill has been put forth as a protective measure on affordable housing, and I think that this bill does quite the contrary. Our market is under duress because there is an influx of folks moving here. We 9 months ago already were experiencing a lot of economic pressure on affordable housing.
And ma'am, we're at 2 minutes. If you can wrap it up, please.
Absolutely. Short-term rentals unequivocally charge a higher nightly rate than that of resident tenants over the long term. This is not going to help us address our affordable housing issue. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you. Next person on the phones, please, BPS.
One moment, Chair. I seem to be having, with the caller with the last three digits, 748. Please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
My name is Laura McSwain, LauraMCSWAIN, and I want to thank the Revenue Committee for the opportunity to speak. I'm the president of McNeil Estates Neighborhood Association. I'm also a native of Las Vegas, and over the years, I've served on various City of Las Vegas committees, including the Planning Commission. While it's appreciated that much has been done to soothe concerns about AB 363, the entirety of our objections are too numerous to outline in the brief amount of time afforded. What I will speak to is that the vigilance of McNeil and the surrounding neighborhood residents that after nearly 5 years resulted in an ordinance that met with general approval and has worked to minimize the impact of STRs in our neighborhoods. In contrast, how is it even considered possible to put forth legislation that even up until midnight last night, its language was unavailable to residents of the neighborhoods mostly uniquely impacted? If each one of you would put yourselves in our shoes, try to imagine the feeling of absolute shock and discouragement that you would feel after such a hard-fought battle, only to discover that you had been left out of over 70 meetings over an 18-month period. And here we are, still unclear on the language of the bill, with concerns of the legal interpretation of language and its consequences. The nuances of the city ordinance are complex and ongoing works in progress. The reason land use issues are local is because we have things such as general plan amendments and zoning ordinance that take years to develop. These processes allow for ongoing public hearings, and any land use issues impacting residents can be addressed within days. The inappropriateness of STRs becoming a state-managed issue through a bill that uniquely affects distinct neighborhoods within a single county warrants the bill being voted down outright on the merits of that alone. And if bans don't work, in the interest of uniformity and shared responsibility, how is it that HOAs with bans in place are not also required to list theirs? Candidly, residents being left out of the conversation during the critical conceptual phase of AB 363's development seems less about the lack of time and more about possible motives still unknown. Assertions in previous
Ma'am, we're at
testimony
2
on
minutes.
how it
Please
will
wrap
help
up.
Thank you, yes. With affordable housing, code enforcement, and the protections of employees within the resort industry lack data or an appropriate study on things like revenue versus cost to enforce, rendering such assertions invalid. We respectfully request that you vote this bill down. I guess you're not going to do that.
BPS, next caller,
Force everyone
please.
back to the
If you have recently joined the meeting and would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. Again, if you have recently joined and would like to provide public comment, please press *9 now to take your place in the queue. For the caller with the last three digits, 809, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and you may begin now.
Good afternoon. My name is Melissa Cassidy, Cassidy. I am opposed to AB 363 as it is currently written. Since the last hearing, the short-term rental to short-term rental distance minimum is 600 feet. While it is an improvement, it is still an overreach. You said, why are we concerned with the city block measurement? I feel this distance is arbitrary and illogical, and I urge you to reduce it to the 500 feet we've requested. It is also proposed that the distance between the casino resorts and a short-term rental is 2,500 feet. This excludes thousands of hardworking, law-abiding taxpayers fresh out of a global pandemic from hosting. These voters have lost jobs, loved ones, and tons of income over the last 14 months. Why are we continuing to step on the little guy so the mega corporations can grab every dollar? Have we learned nothing during COVID? Have we not learned of strife and hard times? Meanwhile, big companies get federal grants while we just hope to keep up our mortgage payments and perhaps retain our jobs as we try and come back. My guests head straight to the Strip in downtown after checking in. Many are budget travelers who cannot afford the overinflated room prices on the Strip. Many international guests are on 4 to 8 week itineraries that demand they stick to a strict budget that does not allow them to stay on the Strip. They shouldn't be able to stay close to the Strip because the big casinos and resorts are being greedy. I urge you to lower these distances. It's the right thing to do. The taxpayers are watching you. Thank you.
Next person for public comment, please.
If you have recently joined the meeting and would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. With the caller with the last 3 digits, 873, please slowly state and spell your name for the record. You have 2 minutes and may begin now.
Hello, my name is Michelle Laramie, MICHELLELARIME, and I live in the Beverly Green neighborhood within the city of Las Vegas. I also serve on our neighborhood association and have worked with many neighbors over the past several years to address shared concerns on STRs. I understand this bill has come a long way from when it was first introduced, and I do thank Assemblywoman Nguyen for her work on this. However, with the bill still in draft form and little clarity around some of the questions asked today, there are still concerns about the enforcement of both legal and illegal STRs, the unequal impacts this industry will have on our older and middle neighborhoods, and also a lot of concern around the proposed regulations in the bill not applying to property owners possessing an unrestricted gaming license. As someone who lives in a neighborhood that's very near Las Vegas Boulevard, I know firsthand how difficult enforcement of STRs can be. It is very frustrating to have this industry in your neighborhood, particularly when homes are not owner-occupied. People do come to Las Vegas to have fun, and we have had to deal with many issues throughout the years, including excessive noise, trash, and unruly behavior, even racing rented sports cars through our neighborhoods. Our only outlet is to call code enforcement and Metro's non-emergency number, and these kinds of incidents take many hours for response, sometimes even weeks, long after the visitor or the behavior is done. So this bill does not help to fix this issue, and when there aren't good resources for mitigating problems like this situation, they do take an emotional toll on our neighbors. It can give rise to stress, conflict, and other consequences. The bill, this also doesn't address the fact that neighborhoods with HOAs are able to exclude STRs from their communities, leaving older communities and middle neighborhoods to bear the social and economic burdens that this bill will impose. By making neighborhoods without HOAs become more appealing to investors, and it really only serves to exacerbate
Ma'am, we're at
the
2 minutes.
inequities
If you
in
can
our
please wrap
housing
it up.
market. Sure. So I don't think that the communities without HOAs should need to bear the burdens and the unintended consequences of this bill. And really quickly, the bill seems to exclude property owners with unrestricted
BPS.
gaming licenses.
Next caller, please.
If you would like to provide public comment, please press star 9 now to take your place in the queue. Chair, the public line is open and working. However, we do not have any callers wishing to provide public comment at this time.
Thank you, BPS. Okay, and with that, we will wrap up public comment. Anything from anyone on the committee? Seeing none. So as far as our next meeting, just stay in touch and we will let you know when, if it will be Thursday or Tuesday. We're still waiting to see what we get from the Senate. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, BPS and staff and committee. And with that, we are adjourned.